You're the principal? But you're a mouse. How does that even work? I'm a mouse, a bear, whatever you want, but I am the principal, Nezu would say, as we would see the dumbfounded Izuku just staring at Nezu in complete confusion, as Nezu would go on to tell him that he is thrilled to have a student like him at UA, saying that he was a bit shocked when he looked into Izuku's files and noticed who his father was, before then breaking out into a tangent about how awesome it is that Izuku inherited his mother's quirk and became even more powerful than his father, who happens to be the number 19 hero Battle Beast. Izuku hearing this would just have this look of just like shut up on his face, with Nezu taking note of this and saying that he will just get to the point. After this, Nezu would go on to explain that his entrance into the school is already secured, but he has an offer for Izuku that he hopes he doesn't refuse, going on to say that he would like to sponsor Izuku to a program that he's actually been working on called the Mini Hero Program, which essentially functions just as it sounds. Students, particularly high schoolers with exceptional abilities, will be allowed to partake in a provisional hero licensing exam early, allowing them to partake in a lot of hero activities that otherwise most other students would only dream of having the opportunity of. It essentially supercharges their pro hero career, and the moment that Izuku hears that this will get him to become a hero even faster, meaning that he can surpass his father on the hero charts, Izuku would immediately look at Nezu with the face of, "Where do I sign?" Nezu would stare at Izuku, going on to say that great, that the test consists of, but Izuku just cuts him off, saying that he doesn't need to hear all that. He will accept this because it's the fastest way to surpass his father on the charts. And Nezu, hearing this, would raise an eyebrow, wondering what exactly is this boy's relationship with his father. However, he would simply agree, going on to tell Izuku that he would like to meet him here the very next day. And so, we would then jump cut to Izuku making his way home, throwing his backpack on the ground, and hanging his jacket on the little coat hanger thing, as he would go on to yell, "Mom, I'm home," to which Inko would say, "Oh, Izuku, you're finally home. What took you so long?" expecting Izuku to have finished that test way faster. But when Izuku would go on to inform her of what had actually taken place, with Principal Nezu instantly accepting him into UA and even wanting to sponsor him into a program called the Mini Hero Program, Inko would be over the moon excited, saying that she's so proud of her son, taking a quirk like hers and making it something incredible, as Izuku's younger brother, who hearing it thanks to his beast quirk that he has like his father's, would go running to the other room, horns out, with like a little bit of like fluffy hair on him, because you know he has a little bit more of that like animalistic appearance, being like, "Bro, you got in and you even got into this program, dude, you are the man." Like he just proceeds to like dap up his brother with like a double high five, with Izuku looking at him and telling him that he knows it, going on to explain that pretty soon he's going to become the #1 hero, saying that a bit loud. Izuku's father, hearing Izuku say that, would simply just ignore it, as he eventually walks into the kitchen once Izuku goes to his room to rest, and we would then see him yell at Inko, being like, "Hey woman, make me some food," as we would see Inko staring at Iashi and going, "Okay." She then whips him up a big old feast, and after he eats it, the dude knocks out for like 3 days. Although while the next day we jump cut to Izuku making his way to the location of the actual provisional licensing exam, which essentially is going to consist of going head to head with a pro hero, in this case Gang Orca, saving civilians from a fake incident just like they would have in the original provisional hero license, but this time it's real, and the civilians that he's saving are heroes, so they could straight up like get injured if he doesn't pull this off from a burning building. And lastly, the final test would actually be participating in like pretty much like taking down an actual villain with pro hero supervision, which in this case the pro supervising him would be Mount Lady. So let's go ahead and cover how that would take place. The moment that Izuku would enter, he would look inside of a massive facility, and seeing this, he would then go on to see that Gang Orca was standing in the middle of everything, Mount Lady being present, and a couple of small time heroes, as well as, you know, some people working with the actual event. So with Deku walking closer towards the direction of the heroes, Izuku would kind of give like a little bit of a head nod to Gang Orca before standing in front of all of them, and Principal Nezu appearing off of Izuku's back. The principal would then go on to explain that this is Izuku Midoriya, saying that he has a phenomenal quirk and that he's the student that he believes will be the first to participate in the mini pro program. And so Gang Orca, hearing that, would ask Izuku if he truly believes himself to be ready to partake such a difficult test like this. Izuku would say that he's game for whatever, and Gang Orca would say that he hopes so, as everybody would leave the area, and we would just kind of watch Mount Lady from the sides going, "Why are we even doing this? I can't believe that you guys made me take time time off of my hero work just so I could supervise some brat. But the moment that Izuku would hear that, he would whisper under his breath, "Oh, I'll show you who's a brat," with Gang Orca hearing that thanks to his super crazy hearing that his quirk gives him access to. Gang Orca would ask Izuku if he's ready, and Izuku would tell him ready as he'll ever be, as we would then see Gang Orca shooting a supersonic attack towards Izuku, which Izuku would dodge by creating wind armor that completely nullifies the effects of the sound, drowning everything out. Gang Orca would be stunned, saying that that is incredible, but all of a sudden, he would start to feel as though there was a level 10 hurricane in the area, and he was unable to even keep his eyes open. And as Izuku would simply walk through the air that was starting to literally leave cuts and gashes on Gang Orca, Izuku would ask if he's impressed yet, with Gang Orca saying, "Don't underestimate a pro," then going on to throw another attack towards the direction of Izuku, which would actually do damage to Gang Orca. Him getting even close to Izuku, to his little like wind armor attack, literally sends him flying back and destroys his hand. Like the pressurized air was actually insane when he made contact with it. And with him now finding himself on the ground, with Izuku walking closer and closer towards him, Gang Orca would start to understand why it was that Principal Xehther entered this kid. So he would simply nod, saying that he concedes, as the air would immediately stop and Mount Lady's hair would be a complete mess, with the heroes watching on that were partaking in this just being like, "Who is this kid?" With Mount Lady thinking, "This kid's a gold mine. If I can get him to be my sidekick or even join my agency, it'll be the talk of the town." Cha-ching, she would think, as she would stare at Izuku, now having a completely different tune for the kid. Thinking that what she'll do is put on that feminine charm and get Izuku to join her immediately, she would walk down there telling Izuku that he was incredible, doing like a whole like girly pose in front of him, with Izuku staring at her and saying that he doesn't like her. Mount Lady would be like, "What?" as Izuku would stare at her, saying that he's the kind of hero that he hates most. Not to mention, she's the type of woman that he would rather avoid. Mount Lady hearing that would feel crushed, hearing a little 16-year-old, or 14 I think actually, literally telling her that she is a promiscuous woman pretty much, right? As Izuku then goes on to be told what the next event was, essentially being told to save civilians from a burning building, as we would immediately see Izuku standing in front of it, closing his eyes, breathing in, and then proceeding to manipulate wind currents to not only put out the fire, but to keep the place steady. Because if Izuku was to have just used his wind to blow out the fire, that would have completely destroyed the foundations of the area. But thanks to the fact that he was using the currents to do two separate things, the place stayed completely afloat, all the while everybody had enough time to literally be floated up by the wind that Izuku was controlling every single one simultaneously, float them out, let them land safely, and then let the building collapse behind them. With Izuku asking, "How's that?" Everybody watching this would say, "He's a prodigy," as Izuku would stand there asking what's next. This is when Mount Lady would be like, "I've got to get this kid into my agency." And so we would then jump cut to her and Izuku walking through the town, her going on to explain that being a hero isn't actually all it's cracked up to be, saying that there's a lot that actually goes into it: paperwork, friendly competition, and hero rankings, saying that most heroes can't even consider this their full-time gig, since it's extremely hard to even break into the top 100, and that's where the real money's at. Izuku hearing that would say that he's not interested in something as superficial as money, as she would then think, "What?" She would look at him and say, "What do you mean you're not interested in money, kid? What kind of hero are you trying to be?" Izuku would say, "The kind of hero that can crush my dad." And she's like, "Right, your father's battle beast, he's the best." But Izuku hearing that is just like, "He's the worst," with her being like, "Damn, I just keep messing up." She would be getting annoyed, and it's in this moment that Izuku could see the sounds of a bank going off that they had just crossed by. Izuku hearing this and recognizing that this is the perfect opportunity to not only save a couple of people, help the bank, but get rid of Mount Lady, since she won't have to supervise him once he completes this test. So with Izuku immediately snapping into action and using his wind to fly over there as fast as possible, we would then go on to see Izuku looking around, assessing the situation quickly, noticing that there was a hole in the ground due to the villain that had actually done this having a mole quirk, which essentially allowed him to dig into the ground, steal the money from the vault, and get away scot-free. However, this villain made a mistake. he did it when Izuku was around. So with Izuku cutting off the air oxygen that was down there in the mole, in the little villain's path that he was digging, the mole literally proceeded to dig straight up and be like, and the moment that happened, Izuku proceeded to slam down like a wind hammer, a literal wind hammer, like he conjured it, smashing the mole dude on the head, who just looked like a really ugly, like short dude with these like little buck-tooth teeth, kind of like how Bugs Bunny looks, and then grabbing the big old bundle of cash that he was carrying and telling the bank that he believes this is theirs. After this would be done, Izuku would then turn in the criminal, and Mount Lady watching this would be like, he's really that guy. As Izuku would go on to tell Mount Lady that he's thankful for her help, but he doesn't really think he's going to be joining her agency or becoming a sidekick anytime soon. As Mount Lady would just be left there dumbfounded, all the while Izuku would walk off, getting a message notifying him that he was going to be receiving his license in the mail in about 2 weeks, give or take, seeing as the paperwork has to go through. So eventually the day would come for Izuku's first day of school, and with this coming around, we would see Izuku waking up to the smell of a delicious breakfast. Everybody would be at the table, with Inko saying that she wanted for everybody to be here for Izuku's big first day. Izuku's father would say that he doesn't see what the big deal is, it's not like he's become a hero yet, but Izuku would simply be thinking to himself that it's only a matter of time now, Dad. Before he would leave, his father would say, don't screw this up, you better go out there and make my name proud. As Izuku, hearing his father's remark, would say, I will, Dad. As we would then pretty much then see Izuku making his way into the UA doors, getting help from a couple of upperclassmen since he had no idea where to go, only to then be greeted by Ida, who would have his hand in Bakugo's face saying, you should not be sitting like that, as Izuku would just ignore everything that was going on around him, sitting down in the class, knowing that class was about to start soon and recognizing that that man there in the sleeping bag was Aizawa. So Izuku would go on to sit down as the sound of muttering would begin, and his classmates would start talking amongst themselves saying, wait, I think that's him. He's the guy who destroyed all the robots. Wasn't he near an exam section? Ida would finally stop yelling at Bakugo, looking at Izuku as he would say, it's him. And Todoroki in the back himself would even be thinking to himself who the heck this guy is. As he would then go on to hear the mutters of his classmates saying that he's the one who destroyed 200 robots at the exam section, with some even saying that yeah, rumor has it he even destroyed the zero pointer. As we then just kind of see Todoroki thinking to himself that that's not a big deal, he could destroy zero pointers too, but he has to admit 200 robots is a bit impressive. So now pretty much, taking a interest in Izuku, everybody would then finally be told to make their way outside, with Izuku changing in the dressing room, showing off some very like Battle Beast Sun type features. The dude is ripped. Like the picture that I have for the thumbnail low-key doesn't do it justice because you guys can't see the physique that Izuku's actually rocking, but the man is, he's kind of him to say the least. Anyways, Aizawa, once this would happen, would go on to toss the ball towards Izuku, telling him that for this test, all he needs to do is throw that ball as far as he can, and so long as he stays within the confines of that circle, he can do whatever he wants with his quirk. Everybody hearing this would be like, what? We get to use our quirks? To which Aizawa would go on to explain to them why that is, telling Izuku to use it already. Izuku in this moment would go on to create a gigantic kaiju form of himself as he would grab onto the ball, rotating its arms 360 degrees countless times before letting it go like it was a freaking shot put, as he would send this thing flying 2,414,000 miles in distance with a couple of meters sprinkled in there. This would shock the class, as Aizawa would even be stunned himself, saying that he'd never seen a record like that, with Aizawa just thinking to himself that that must be why Izuku's part of the mini pro hero program. The dude is actually insane. He would watch Izuku closely as the rest of the events would take place, consisting of the 50-meter dash, which Izuku would absolutely blitz, but not too fast, considering that with Izuku's wind quirk, it actually takes a bit of time for him to like rack up crazy speed. Then we have the grip strength test, Izuku using his actual strength to get a pretty impressive number, however, not being satisfied by the fact that one of his classmates had actually gotten a little better, Izuku uses his wind quirk to amplify it and completely crush the machine. After this would come the standing long jump, which Izuku would clear the entire box, and then would come the repeated side-to-side steps, with Izuku using the wind current to push him back and forth so many freaking times he starts to literally make mirages. with the class all just staring at Izuku in complete awe. He can do all that with a wind quirk? Kaminari would say, as we would then see Mineta say, yeah, that thing. I can't believe that there's somebody out there who can do all of this. As we would probably get like a classic anime scene of Aizawa just being like, I see, so this is his power? Nah, I'm totally kidding, but he would probably just be thinking to himself that that's the power of the number 19 hero battle beast? It's incredible. As we would then jump cut to the last 3 tests, which would probably be push-ups, sit-ups, and toe touches, with Izuku doing pretty well during all of those. And with that all being said, as Izuku would be doing some stretches after finishing the last set, people would go over towards him saying that he is incredible, with people singing his praises and Izuku starting to smile until suddenly Katsuki Bakugo would go over to him saying, hey, don't let these damn extras over here make you have a big head. You're still not the best in this classroom, you got it? That title goes to me. As Todoroki would walk over towards Izuku, telling him that he's going to be making for a pretty good rival in his time here, telling Izuku that he looks forward to going head to head with him in this classroom. Izuku would nod, looking at Todoroki, realizing that yeah, that guy, he's pretty strong. As the day would eventually end, and with Izuku looking around to make sure nobody was there, Izuku would then go on to use his quirk to fly home. However, before it would activate, his homeroom teacher Aizawa would be standing behind Izuku, deactivating his quirk and telling him that Principal Nezu would actually like to have a word with him. This is when Izuku would raise an eyebrow at this, and realizing what his teacher had just done, he would connect the dots, realizing that his homeroom teacher just so happened to be Eraserhead, literally probably one of the only people in the world who would fall under the category of a hard counter for him. So, as Izuku would make his way to Nezu's office, he would sit down as there would be a very frail blonde-haired man sitting there who would then buff up, revealing himself to be All Might. Then going on to explain what his reasoning is for being here, how he pretty much is looking for a successor, and he believes that Izuku Midoriya is that successor. Izuku hearing this would tell All Might that he's flattered, but honestly, he wants to become a hero using his own strength. He didn't spend countless hours every single day before and after school training just so he could take the #1 hero's quirk and rise to the top that way. He wants to make sure all of his hard work meant something. So All Might hearing this and respecting Izuku's, decision, he would go on to tell Izuku that he's proud of him, and that although he's disappointed that he doesn't become his successor, he will be looking forward to seeing everything that Izuku accomplishes. But Izuku then staring at him would say that that's not actually all he had to say. If he's still looking for a successor, he might actually have someone in mind. Though he might be a bit younger than him, he might still have that heroic heart he's searching for. And All Might raising an eyebrow at this would then be taken to the Midoriya household, All Might entering the room and being greeted by Battle Beast, who just starts like roaring, be like, what are you doing here, All Might? All the while Izuku would get in the middle of them saying, chill dad, I brought him over here so we could meet Katsuya. And Izuku's father would be like, get lost, All Might, I don't want you in my house. All the while All Might would just kind of be sitting there and be like, nice to see you too, Battle Beast. After this would take place, Izuku now showing All Might his brother Katsuya, who has an exceptional quirk and is actually pretty strong himself, would go on to say that this is the person that he wanted to meet and who he believes could be the successor of One For All. He goes on to tell All Might that while his brother might not look like much, he's an exceptional person, and Katsuya would be like, hey, that's rude, as Izuku would tell him, shut up, going on to explain to him that they need to spar now to show All Might just how strong he is. So Katsuya going into his Battle Beast form, transforming, like growing larger, his claws extending and all this stuff, he would look at his brother telling him that he's going all out. He would leap from one side of the wall to the next before then rushing towards Izuku and trying to stab him. However, before his hand would fully connect with Izuku, the wind would send him backwards, with All Might being shocked at how close his brother had actually managed to get to him, nearly actually breaking through the wind barrier, since that was something that his brother had had to go against for years since Izuku had finally discovered that move when he was 8. So with All Might watching this and seeing that he was young enough to actually train into like a next big thing, he would go on to like pretty much say that he would actually accept that offer, but only if Battle Beast is okay with that. As we would then hear screams from Battle Beast saying, give him the quirk already! I can't wait for my son to become even stronger than All Might. I knew my son would one day become powerful enough to become the #1 hero, and I was right to choose you, son. Patting Katsuya's hair, as Izuku would stare at his dad just rolling his eyes saying, whatever. This is when Izuku would begin to wait for what All Might's response would be, and All Might would rip out a little piece of hair, offering it to his brother going, "Eat this," with Izuku and Katsuya both being like, "What? All Might, if you came here to joke, this is not funny." But All Might would say, "No, it's real. You have to ingest some of my DNA in order for the quirk to transfer. Look, I know it's weird, but this is just how it works." So Izuku, hearing this from All Might, would then be like, oh, sorry, All Might. Well, Katsuya, bottoms up, as he would put this in a drink and just drink down like a cup of water. After this would happen, he would like start clenching his hands and being like, "I don't really feel different." To which All Might would reply by telling him that he's not supposed to feel different, since the quirk actually takes a little bit of time to transfer. Which is interesting because if you guys have actually seen the movie, I believe it was Two Heroes or Heroes Rising or something like that, Izuku had transferred his quirk to Bakugo and it was literally instantaneous. Maybe it was because like they did it via blood and they like both touched it, so it instantly went into his like system. I don't know, but the point is, All Might would go on to tell him that tomorrow he would like to meet both boys at Dagoma Beach after each of their schools respectively. And Izuku, looking towards his brother, would say that he's game, as the very next day would roll around, and in the morning, his brother could feel the power, since after all, he had been born with a quirk that essentially causes him to transform into like a bigger, buffer, like animalistic state, just like his father. So when he does this, he becomes 2 times bigger, claws even sharper, and he just feels his muscles just bulging with energy. The one-for-all transference system worked like a charm in this instance, and as Izuku would stare at his younger brother, he couldn't help but smiling, with Izuku's father rushing in the room and saying, "I'm so proud of you, son. You are my greatest accomplishment in life." Like just straight up in front of Izuku, just like completely acting like his son, who, mind you, was the whole reason this happened, and literally is part of the mini pro hero program, and is like the greatest thing ever since like All Might came around, is right there. But I digress. Point is, after this would take place, Izuku would tell his brother he'll meet him at the beach later, with Battleby saying that he might just actually drop by too. Izuku would roll his eyes, saying that he doesn't want his dad to be there, and his dad would simply growl at him, telling him that he'll be where he wants, that he's the man of the house. As we would then jump cut to Izuku in the classroom, him being pissed off since the morning and last night didn't exactly go as he had planned. And with All Might coming into the room being like, "I am here," Izuku would be like, "Oh, All Might, at least something good's happening," before then realizing, wait, All Might, going on to understand that he's actually one of his homeroom teachers. Izuku would be shocked, not having expected this, since because even though he is technically being sponsored by Nezu, it's not like he's in contact with Nezu 24/7 or is asking things like, "Who's gonna be the teacher?" or "What are we gonna do in class today?" Izuku doesn't care. He just kind of likes living life on the fly and just having things happen spontaneously, which in my opinion is the best way to live life. But anyways, with All Might arriving, he would go on to explain what's gonna be happening today, and that their classroom is gonna consist of the battle trial arc, which for today's occasion, I'm going to be using a random generator to use 2 random names and his teammates. So let me go do that real quick. All right. So we got his teammate being Yuga Aoyama, which honestly, when I got that pick, I was like, really? Him? And his opponents are going to be Dark Shadow or Tokiyami and Mineta, which I just thought of the funniest interaction that could happen. So I'm excited to cover this. All right, the event would immediately take place with Izuku picking his teammate and then the 2 random balls being picked for who he's going up against. Bakugo, noticing in this timeline that he wasn't facing off against either Todoroki or Izuku, would be pretty annoyed, screaming, going, "Let me try again, damn it, I didn't get the right ball," as we would then have All Might telling him that he has to sit back down and everyone else has to pick. And with that happening, what would take place after this is that we would see Izuku introducing himself to Aoyama, extending a hand, to which the boy would then be like, "Glitter," or no, not glitter. Wait, what is Aoyama's like little catchphrase? It's like shine or glamour? Dude. I actually don't. Wait, no, it's Twinkle. The dude would be like, "I can't stop twinkling." And Izuku, staring at his teammate, would be like, "Yeah, man. So anyways, just stay behind me and we'll pass." Just giving Aoyama this look of like, "Bro, who are you?" As we then have him step into the room, which luckily for Tokiyami, seeing as his quirk is actually empowered by darkness, he would actually find that this might just benefit his team. But the moment that the test would begin, Izuku would go on to float to the top and fly around, looking inside of every window to see what room it was exactly that his opponents were inside of. Suddenly, Tokiyami, noticing that Izuku was actually outside of their window and about to enter, would shoot Dark Shadow towards him, trying to attack Izuku. However, Izuku, with one swift moment, by pretty much Just flicking his finger, he would cut Tokiyami's dark shadow in half, sending it retreating into him immediately, with Tokiyami being shocked and Mineta watching as Izuku would rush into the building, him starting to throw his little like balls that he has on his head towards Izuku, being like, "Stay away, you! Don't come any closer, I'm warning you!" As we would then see the boy literally piss his pants, all the while Izuku would fly right past the two of them, like sending them both flying at separate directions of the wall with his wind quirk and then touching the bomb. As we would then hear All Might go, "Hero team wins!" with Yuga just being like, "Twinkle," you know, like acting as though he had just done something. After this would happen, everybody would start singing his praises, with Aoyama being like, "But didn't you see that I was the star of the show?" He'd probably do something like that. But anyways, with that being the case, the school day would end, and with Izuku showing just how efficient and how like literally awesome he is with his quirk, the classroom would all solidify the fact that the three strongest are definitely Deku, Todoroki, and Bakugo might just be on their level. Bakugo hearing this would definitely get pissed off, with everybody finally ending the day, going home, and Izuku and Katsuya making their way towards the direction of Deguma Beach. Oh, and for those of you guys that actually recognize the reference that I'm making with the name Katsuya, you guys are real ones. Anyways, that said, what takes place here is that Izuku would be walking down the little like slippery slope with his brother, kind of like crushing his head, being like, "Yeah, like attaboy, like you better impress All Might today," with his brother being like, "You're the best, dude, like I can't believe you denied the quirk just to give it to me," with Izuku being like, "Yeah, I definitely did it for that reason," as the two would finally arrive to All Might and he would say, "Well, shall we get started?"
I am here! Thanking you for making it to the end of the video. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with a friend, and stay plus ultra!